Well, that's it. It's the 6th lecture and the last one. We reached the end of our trouble. And today I want to speak about a more modern painter than the one we saw up to now. I'll speak of a man called Jacques Hurtubise. You will see by his style that he's a still active artist. And maybe some of you remember that we had a retrospective of his work in 1998. Also here in this museum, so not so long apart. And the thing I want to do is to take one period of his production during the 80s, and you will see why, because then I think there's a certain link to the general subject that we have deal with this year. It is the 80s, and it started for Hurtubise with a tragedy. His only daughter got killed in December 1980, going out from the house toward the high school, and she was hit by a car and died on the spot. And the immediate reaction of Hurtubise, him and his wife, was in a way a little bit curious. They decided to leave the place where they used to live in north of Montreal and to travel west. They had a certain pretext for that. There was 2 exhibitions of Hurtubise were organized on the West Coast, one at Long Beach in California and the other one in Vancouver Art Gallery. So they have this pretext, but they rented a kind of camper, if you want, in which Hurtubise organized a small little studio, very crammed and very small. And they went like this through the United States and through Canada toward west at a slow pace, if you want. And I says it's strange because habitually when you are in mourning, the rest of the world doesn't interest you much. You are concentrating on only the aspect who are related to the person who died. You stick to these symbols or to these remnants, and the rest doesn't. As if voluntarily the couple Hurtubise wanted to resist to that tendency. And so they went like this, and finally they fixed themselves in New Brunswick. They bought a nice place in front of the sea in 1983. And Hurtubise came back from time to time to Quebec, but he lives now in Cap-Breton. And the other thing they did also in 1996, I'll just give you these facts to organize a little bit the, let's say, the biographical data that you may need for understanding what's happening in his painting. In 1986, they decided even to go further. He went to China. And he went with a group which is called Aventure, and who are known not to be too nice to their clients, well, meaning that they travel a lot in trains with regular people there. They are not treated as tourists, if you want. And for him, that was important because, again, he could see the people as they are, and he could see different places. And they went like this for this long trip in 1986. Okay, so that's more or less the main event of this period, the death of his daughter, and then this kind of running away from the place where it happens, in order to keep also, as I would say, a certain interest in the external world. Hurtubise is an abstract painter, but always with relation to figuration. And during that period, the relation is very strong, as you will see. Okay, so I will show you, just to situate a little bit his style and that you could see the type of problem that his painting was trying to deal with even before the accident. I will show you two works. This one was done at La Rochelle, so this is in France, and this is why you see La Rochelle in the title. I kept the title in French this time because you will see if sometime he makes puns and things like that that are absolutely untranslatable. I will try to explain what it means, but I think we have to keep them in French because of the puns or the play of words that he's doing. And this one was done so before the accident of his daughter, in France, and he was invited with a series of other Canadian artists in La Rochelle. They had an old chapel there, they didn't know what to do with it, and he transformed it in studio, and he worked there, and this is one of the paintings that he did there. The first thing that is striking when you see a Hurtubise painting, it is this kind of spontaneity. It seems to be done with a kind of completely free gesture, and as if he could really improvise on the canvas. You have little drops and things like that, as if it was done in front of our very eyes. Kind of a series of dark clouds piled one above the other like this. But then he introduced a different system in which right away you have a problem in terms of interpretation, because now it's a little bit the same thing, except that you have two sections. And these sections are real. I mean, you have to see them as two different canvases put side by side. It's not one with a kind of, let's say, a pencil straight line in the middle. No, it's really two canvases, one beside the other, with the same type of free gesture. But okay, then he says, I get the same feeling that I had in the painting before, but in this one, you have a certain explanation that your mind wants to give. How come you could repeat, you see, a spontaneous gesture on both sides like this? And they do correspond, as you see, there's the same number. It's as if it was really planned. So you have an element of spontaneity, of dynamism, of speed, if you want, but you have also an element of control and of almost of repression. And this crack in the middle, I think, is very significant. It's Leonard Cohen, who in one of his songs, he said, there's a crack in everything. That's how the light get in. And it's exactly that. In a way, it's like the entrance of these two patterns that will go on each side, and that he will develop after. You will see most of the work I will show you are based on this principle that you have in this first painting. When Nathalie, this is the name of his daughter that I mentioned before, died, he made this huge painting in which it's built exactly like that, except that not only you have a middle line like this, but you have two others on each side, one here, and the other in the middle, and then another one on the right side. As if not only you have a flow of rage and tears and all the drama, but also this flow is repeated again on the side and go even further. It's an immense work. It's 8 meters long. So it's not... and this photo is not very good, but anyway, it gives an idea of what it can be. Black and white also, this is the real color of the thing, it's not different. And he used to give title to his work with name of woman, but habitually he choose a name or very uncommon or a little bit comical, like émérancienne, for instance. This is not a word, a name that you will see often, except maybe in the older generation. I have to be prudent with that. Sometimes maybe I will have an émérancienne here in the public. But just to say, okay, it's not an habitual name. And I think he did it habitually like, say, a tongue in the cheek type of attitude, just for fun. But now, with this one, it's called Nathalie, and it's the name of his daughter, so it's no more fun. And then he will quit the system. After, he will never name a painting through the name of a woman or even any inkling of this kind of comedy that he had before, and it's understandable. So you have now the system of 2 panel and even 4 panel, if you want, and always this mixture of control and dynamism and spontaneity. And this is very typical of Hurtubise' all work. He's a master at it, and sometimes you look at it and say, how can he do this? You ask yourself technically how this thing can be possible. Then I told you he goes to this long trip toward west, and he lived in a kind of improvised little studio in his camper that they travel with. And then he make a series of work on paper. Of course, when you show them like this, like in slides or in this type of presentation, all always looks the same size, but this one is much smaller. These, you have to imagine that it's about that size, and it's not, it doesn't give this impression of a huge work like this. And then you see that if you ask yourself how this thing could be possible or done, you understand that it was folded. That to get the kind of very symmetrical type of pattern like you have here, you paint on one side of the sheet, and then you fold it like this, and you obtain a kind of double, and even I would say that you have a double symmetry there. You have one left to right, but also even one up and down, if you want, more or less. And he called these things pterodactyl, but he write it with the orthograph mistake, pterodactyl, and of course it's an allusion to these horrible birds of prehistory. You have one here, we will find them of course just in skeleton, but you have this reconstruction were done also of them. They look terrible, they look like a featherless type of big bird like this going above the horizon, and with their children and with their chicks in front, they make it even worse. The idea of a kind of folding over to get a kind of symmetrical pattern reminds us, of course, of the Rorschach test. You know what it is? It's you go to your psychologist and you're in trouble, and you will find your personality with this Rorschach test. It's basically 10 cards that he presents to you, 5 in black and white, if you want, and 2 in black and red. Which is interesting because this is the color of the previous painting of Hurtubise, and then 3 others with pastel type of color. And then he asks you what this recall to you, what do you see in it when you see this type of pattern. And so people interpret it, and then after you have another series of questions where you try to find out what attracts your attention in the pattern. Is it the whole thing, like people who see butterflies and they say, no, it's the whole thing. And the others, no, I see here just my mother-in-law, whatever. Anyway, so they are attracted by one detail or the other. And then are they sensitive to the color or to the form? Are they sensitive? And which kind of interpretation they give. And from that, the psychologists create a kind of pattern. He can measure it also with numbers, and he ends up with a certain interpretation of your personality. This test of Rorschach, of course, it's used for psychological needs, but you can see it also as a kind of design, and it's Gombrich have a nice analysis of this. He says, if we had only half of the Rorschach, if you have just one spot like this, he says probably we will not be able to associate it with too much thing. It is when it's double, when there is a symmetrical pattern, that it becomes to excite the imagination, because there's so many things in our surrounding who are symmetrical like that. Starting with any living thing, I would say, have symmetry. The face also, that's why so many people see faces in Rorschach and butterflies and things like that, because it's a kind of pattern that you find often. But you realize the opposition between what is just a spot, let's say, and looks like a spot and cannot create too much association, and this kind of symmetry suddenly that reveals form and reveals meaning. And that's one of the hypotheses I have with Hurtubise. It is that it's exactly what he's looking for. He's looking for a meaning. He's looking for something. And then he goes spontaneously, without even thinking of that, to this system in which you get a symmetrical image, and then from there, maybe something will appear, something will manifest itself. Look, another example of these drawings that he did like this during this trip toward West, it is this one, it's called Carouge et Jaune. Again, this is a kind of a play of word, if you want. Carouge is a bird in French. It is the red-winged blackbird. Le Carouge. And okay, and to call it et jaune, of course, he plays on red and yellow. And Carouge, and in fact, the color of the Carouge is there. You have the black, you have the red, And yeah, you know, this is a bird that you see in the springtime and or close to water. And he makes a specific sounds. I will not try to imitate it, but okay. I don't think it's not important, but it's, this you will find often in the title of Hurtubise, is kind of play of words like this. That's why I thought it's difficult to translate, and I have to keep that in French. Here again, you have this same type of symmetry. There's an axis here in the middle, and then even an inkling of a vertical and horizontal symmetry in both directions. But then what is interesting, I think, to see, it is what is appearing, it's a little bit like a kaleidoscopic image. You know what's a kaleidoscope? If you think of the word itself, it comes from the Greek. Kalos is beauty, beautiful, and heidos, a form, beautiful form, and scopein, of course, is to look at, and to look at beautiful form. It's a device that helps you to look at beautiful form. And it was invented in the 19th century by a man called Brewster, and he thought that he found a fantastic invention that will be able to create tons of pattern very fast. So he says what takes hours for artists to do, with a kaleidoscope you can get it in a few minutes. It will create in a single hour what 1,000 artists could not invent in the course of a year, and while it works with such unexampled rapidity, it works also with a corresponding beauty and precision. But the kaleidoscope I'm showing you, the pattern I'm showing to you now, are a specific type of it, in which instead of having little piece of glass and plastic transparent, you could look at the landscape. Let's see here, a street, or here a kind of telephone booth like you will find in London. And then what you see, of course, because of the mirror inside, you see this kind of complex type of image, very symmetrical also, and very well organized. The main idea, of course, there, it is that in real life, you have chaos, you have no order, but through the kaleidoscope, you create an order. But with one proviso, the kaleidoscope also becomes to make more and more obscure the source of the image. Meaning, if you don't know, if you had only, let's say, this image here and not the one beside, it would be very difficult to guess exactly what you are looking at. You gain in symmetry and order, but you lose in signification, in meaning. And I think it's one of the problems that Hurtubise had with this kind of kaleidoscopic image, if you want. He wanted to save, at any cost, a certain meaning. You get order, you get beauty, you get a well-organized type of form, but you must find also some meaning in it. And if I show you again the Carouge, Rouge et Jaune, and I just enlarge here a detail, you will see, I think I'm not exaggerating, but we see a kind of face here appearing. You could read this like an eye, maybe the head of a cat or something, or an oriental face or something, as if there was a kind of mask here appearing in the middle of the composition. And this will be, of course, a key for Hurtubise development, because this is exactly what he's looking for. He's looking for something coming from the picture, let's say, and addressing like a face to him. Where this pattern will become more and more evident, it's during this visit in China. Then he will do, to get busy, because this long trip through the country there was very not productive in a way. So he got the little pamphlet. Sometimes it was a poster for announcing theater, or sometimes it was a menu in a restaurant, something like that. And he cut them out, and he glued them, and he obtained a pattern like the two that you see there, that is part of a kind of book that he created, an artist's book, was called Le Livre de la Chine, with remnants of that. Basically, at the bottom of it, if you want, you have the Rorschach system, in which you fold your paper and you obtain, in particular, all the things you are black here in the picture are obtained like that. The color thing here, you see, for instance, you have two roosters. one in front of the other. This comes from this pamphlet, and it was cut and glued on the top. So you have element of collage, and you have element of monotype, if you want, as if you just bend the two sheets together. And he may also even correct some of them, add few details, and obtain this kind of picture who looks much more than before like or an animal. You see, for instance, you see you can read 2 nostrils and then 2 ears on the top, and maybe where the rooster eye will be the eyes normally, but you get toward a definitive type of figure. That was one of the problems, let's say, of Hurtubise at the time, who was known as a kind of abstract painter, and people would say, you are going back to figuration and all that. But you understand that this is not important in a way. This passage is come from the very system that he's using, and by creating this symmetric image, he does exactly what the recherche can do. He transforms what could be just a spot in something that suddenly have meaning, have signification. Then, coming back from China, then you get these big paintings this time. They are, this one is about 150 centimeters, so 1 meter, and it's bigger. And you will call them, you will see there's 3 series of them. This one is called the Griffon series. The Griffon, I think you can say that in English too. It's, and the Griffon fou, of course, you play on the sounds. If you translate it in English, it doesn't work. Crazy Griffon will make nothing. Griffon fou, okay. Then the system in which these paintings, rather big size, are done, it is, again, it's like two sections, and you have in the middle hinges. So imagine you are behind the picture, you have a frame like this, and here you have in the middle two pieces of wood, and in between you have fringes, in order that you will be able to fold them one above the other. So you paint on one side, then fold it on the other side, then reopen it, and then eventually you could correct some things, could add some painting. I asked him, how much time do you do that? Do you do that at once and you obtain your double? He said, I can go that up to 20 times. Opening, closing it, opening and closing it, and adding to it, and making finally a very complex image with this mixture of spontaneity, if you want, and control, like I mentioned before. It's a very good example of this. And the allusion to the Griffon is not completely whimsical. I think you will see, he will speak of Griffon, Triton, and he will go always to this type of association, and all of them goes toward one direction. What the Griffon was, let's say, in mythology, in the past, it was a kind of mythical animal that is represented here with the body of a lion, the head of an eagle, and with wings of an eagle. Here you see Alexander crossing the Red Sea. Of course, that's why it's red, and going toward the other side, and you have one of his knight who is in the corner there, and you see him like a king on this kind of mythical animal. I don't know if you have this also in English, but this little bird, who is in fact a black swift, it's a bird who goes in chimney and lives there. It's called also a griffon. This is the kind of popular name for it in French. And you have a dog also, it's called like this. So you could have all these associations, but I think the main one is the mythical one. And then when you have this and you go back to this type of picture, you see that he plays always to this kind of symmetrical image, but also trying to get to name, I would say, this image, this face that appearing to him. Like here, he called it ton griffon. Ton written like that with T-A-O-N, it's a gadfly. It's or if you want, even in Quebecois, a ton, it's habitually a bee, a male bee. And it's also, if you say to somebody, it's a ton, this is not nice to say. I'm sure it means you are stupid or something like that. Yeah, it's kind of an insult also. here I think why he think of insect and all that, because the head of this personage is so small, it's like reduced on the top, and as if the mouth or the region that will correspond to the mouth become more and more enlarged and big, and like it swallows something, and it's more and more impressive in that time, as if it was invading more and more this universe. From that, it's not astonishing that he went to dragon. And it's there, I think there's an interesting collection with my main theme. The dragon, as is represented here, becomes more and more psychedelic in a way. And Hurtubise, of course, belongs to the generation of the 60s, and he was attracted to drugs like anybody at the time, and he had his little LSD period and all that. Of course, this is very far from that in his life. I don't think these paintings were not done under drugs usage or things like that. But he could refer to it. He could reconstruct, let's say, the type of experience he had there. And that's why I think it suggests a parallel with the fact that this EP generation also coincides with the multiplication of religious sects. The two phenomena are really parallel in time. You have even people like Timothy Leary, who was one of the big guru of the drug era, if you want, of the 60s, created also a church. He called it the League for Spiritual Discovery. If you think of the acronym there, League of Spiritual Discovery, it makes LSD, of course. And you have others like the Neo-American Church of Mr. Kleps in Miami is also a church in which the sacrament is basically marijuana and to LSD. So, well, and this, what is behind this is, of course, a way to try to experiment something of what the mystics are speaking all the time, say another vision, a more profound type of vision of the world than you have. But instead of getting it through meditation and through long process of purification, you can get it right away with drugs. This was more or less what was behind this. The great poet that have experimented that and have expressed this well is Henri Michaud. Michaud is interesting because not only he writes beautifully about his experience and he makes many books around it. He took mescaline, who was well, a potent type of drugs and could really create a completely different type of vision. Let's say it's a very visual drug. And he draw not exactly under mescaline, but after some impression that he has of it. And this drawing is interesting because it's very close to the type of face that you get also in Hurtubise's work, meaning that you have a face that appears suddenly, symmetrical also, with the eyes pushed toward the side like this of the outline of the face, and with this kind of huge mouth. And what Michaud describes all the time, it is the very negative and very fear, I would say it creates fear. It's a formidable type of presence that suddenly reveals itself. And he referred to the mystic who very often speak of the devil, in their experience also, there's always the possibility of this negative side. He says, he quotes Catherine of Siena, for instance, who says that she have a vision in 1 second of the devil face, and he says, I will never be able to live again without thinking of it all the time. See, they have this type of mixed experience in which you are very close to God on one hand, but on the other hand, it can be exactly the opposite. And what Michaud described it is that suddenly these type of face that appear under mescaline like this are absolutely, how can I describe it, are absolutely denying your own existence. They are there, they judge you, they see you even, they see even the evil in the good you do, he says. which is a fantastic description of that. As if you are confronted to your own duplicity, and with a face who have absolutely no compassion, no feeling for you, who is like the pure superego, if you want, that suddenly appear and is judging you. And if you go back to this series of Hurtubise, you do have sometimes the feeling of that this is a huge mouth that is about to swallow you, that opened like a black abyss like this, and and have absolutely no compassion to you, to whatever you feel. It's just there swallowing you. And the more you go in this, okay, maybe this is a kind of a representation of evil, but it's also a representation of death. I think this is the key, finally, of these faces that appear, that impose themselves in his work more and more, and it is as if courageously trying to find meaning of the death that struck him so personally, and you see them coming in this kind of these apparition of that kind. Of course, there is an iconography of the dragon, let's say, both in Occident and in Orient. Let's say, traditionally in the Occident, the dragon is associated with St. George, like you see on the left here. The idea, it is that St. George is killing the dragon to save this lady. But in fact, what we know, St. George is a kind of legendary type of saint that we're not sure that he existed really, but anyway. And he was converting, he was a martyr, let's say, but before that, he succeeded to convert to Christianity a part of Cappadocia, so that means somewhere in Turkey. And the woman who is there habitually represents Cappadocia. And the dragon is a symbol of paganism, of what, let's say, St. George was able to deliver this country. But with time, of course, this thing has been forgotten. And in the later iconography, what you see habitually, it is the idea that St. George is a knight, and he's very, he defends this girl from the clutch of the dragon, and she seemed like she have to be, let's say, sacrificed to the dragon or something. They have always a little story in which you have a woman and a knight, and not only symbolical meaning. This, of course, is contaminated a little bit by the Perseus legend also. You remember Perseus with the Gorgona coming with the Medusa and trying to find also to save some woman there. And, okay, and then on the right, I have another example of this, but it's immersed now in a completely different context. It's a beautiful, small painting this time. It's not very big, this thing, of Albrecht Altdorfer. It's a German painter of the 16th century. Again, with St. George, you see him here. And the dragon, well, looks like a big frog, I would say. He's not very credible. What is fantastic here, it is this kind of invasion of the forest. It's as if the little panel there is basically about the forest, about the trees. And just because in the forest to have a kind of little introduction scene in the bottom, otherwise we will not need them really. And this is, of course, it's a huge theme in German art. As you know, the very existence of Germany at the time of the Roman was saved by the forest, by the Hercynian forest. When Varus and when the other legionnaires tried to enter in Germania of the time, the eponym hero of Germany was Hermann. They succeeded to retract in the forest and to bring the legionnaire inside of the forest and then to be able to get rid of them. So in the ethos, let's say, of Germany, the forest is a very, very important theme. And I think it's more or less what Altdorfer was suggesting it. So you do have, let's say, a tradition of dragon in the in Occidental art, and habitually dragons are negative, as something bad. They are or a symbol of paganism, or sometimes something who is dangerous that we have to kill in order to save people. But in the Oriental tradition, the dragon is generally positive. It is a very powerful being, but able to, let's say, chase the enemy, to protect the prince and to protect the emperor. Like here, you see the emperor Hongxi, and with behind him a huge dragon on a panel like this, and all the symbols related to him. You see even a bowl or a plate. You will have dragons with 5 claws habitually, and who are in fact protecting the king and protecting the emperor. You find him in many contexts, like here, for instance, he's here, but he's associated with a bird, who's a phoenix, and the phoenix is a symbol of the empress, rather. And in the middle, you have here a kind of pearl in flame, who represent the heart of the Buddha and the purity of the Buddha. So as if they were competing for it in this sculptured lac plague. Here you have maybe another theme where things goes less good between the emperor and the empress, since you have a fight between the dragon and the phoenix. So on a tapestry. But it's in Persia, so it's far from the center of China, so probably they could afford to have. Because in this plate here, of course, what is suggested is the harmony between the yang and the yin. The yang being the masculine aspect, and the yin, the feminine one, and they are completing each other. But here in Persia, they understood maybe less that, and they create this kind of fight between, you have 2 birds in white, and you have a dragon in kind of blue, that you can follow like a big serpent in the middle. And indeed, since Hurtubise was in China, I could imagine that this type of symbols were not indifferent to him. He could find there, and there, with the tradition of the Occident and with the one of the Orient, he have this ambivalence and say what it is exactly. Is it negative or positive? It's a kind of phase that will impose itself, and we don't know exactly what is its final meaning. Then he started a 3rd series of tritons this time, triton triste, or triton triple. And then you have to realize these pictures are smaller in size. They are not big painting or oil painting. They are on paper. They are work on paper. And what is mysterious here is this: you don't see anymore the folding. You don't see how it's done. So you say, is he really able to do that like this, a perfectly symmetrical type of drawing, without any guidance and all that, meaning that he could make one line like this and then repeat it on the other side. And probably the system here is more like a monotype. A monotype, you know what it is. It's basically it's a print of which you have only one copy. So suppose that he have a paper in which he could fold and he could put in any direction, and then when he got still wet, he got his pattern, he just glue it on another piece of paper. And so you obtain a perfectly symmetrical thing without any folding in the middle, and you create this kind of strange impression between something is very spontaneous, very free, if you want, and on the other hand, also very controlled because of the symmetry. And then you will see a few examples in which they become even almost kitsch also, in terms of color. He used, in his studio, when I went there, I says, my God, you must have stolen all the mustard and ketchup little containers that you see in cheap restaurants. You see these things that you squeeze, and because he had tons of them with color. And he used that, instead of paint, of a brush, if you want, he used this color right away like this. And that's why the coloring is come from the tube, in a way, without too much working. So sometimes the effect can be almost kitsch, like here, I think. But notice that you don't see any line in the middle there. It's as if you could control that completely without any. And if you look in details, you would see always a repetition on each side, like any symmetrical figure will do that. Alors, there is many of them. I just show you more rapidly a few of them to see. And always you have this kind of face that appear on the top here, for instance, maybe another one below, and then this huge mouth that happened always at the bottom. Here on white background, other time it was, you see a more dark background. You have variation from one to the other. Another one is the triton blanc, in which again the white is very prominent, as if this is a technique that we call the reserve. You do it in watercolor. When you want to have white, you don't intervene at all. You just left it untouched. And then again, it's supposed to a more difficult control of the image. This triton theme also have a tradition, and you indulge with an art historian who like to always go back to these things and try to put them in context, even if I'm sure that Hurtubise will be the first to say, I never heard of these things before. It doesn't matter too much. It's just to see that when you use these themes, you are in fact, willing or not, you are in fact inside of a tradition. The triton that you see here is a kind of thing. We have a mermaid, but we could say we have a merman also. It's like the masculine counterpart of the mermaid. So it's habitually a man who ends up with a fish tail, and he's very often represented like this, blowing a shell and to make sounds. You have a very famous painting of Raphael in which you see these tritons. It is this Galatea nymph. You know what was the theme? It is that Galatea was daughter of Neptune, so she's very at ease in water, and she goes in her little shell here, pulled by two dolphins, and she's circled by these tritons that are blowing their shells here. One of them on a horse, and the other is just standing there. But the more important one is here, is the one who try to embrace this Nereid, one of the attendant of Galatea, and trying to bring her inside of the underworld, trying to bring her in death, in a way. And to my surprise, when I was reading something absolutely, well, the last place I expected to see that, it is the famous Danish philosopher, it's called Søren Kierkegaard, in a book is called Fear and Trembling, which is basically about the dilemma of Abraham having to sacrifice his son Yitzhak, as you know. And suddenly you have a passage about this type of situation that you see in this painting, that one of the tritons wants to bring to the sea a woman that he loves, but with the consequence that if she goes with him inside of the sea, she will be lost. She will be dead because she could not. He can breathe underwater, but she cannot. And the dilemma, like Kierkegaard see it, is that way. He says, then Agnete, well, this is the name of this nymph that you see, looks at him again, not fearfully, not questioningly, not proud of her good look, not intoxicated with desire, but in absolute faith, with absolute humility, like the humble flower she deemed herself to be. With absolute confidence, she entrusts to him her entire fate. And look, the ocean roars no more. Its wild voice is still. Nature passion, which is the merman's strength, deserted him. The sea becomes dead calm, and still Agnete is looking at him that way. Then the mermaid collapses. He is unable to resist the power of innocence. His elements become unfaithful to him. He cannot seduce Agnete. Not sure it will work, but anyway. what is extraordinary here, it is this idea suddenly that we are dealing with death again, with this theme. And also that the absurdity of the killing, I'd say a car accident is a completely absurd situation in which even with the best situation like described here, you have no chance whatsoever to choose. And again, each time when you go in the iconography that he chose, the dragon, the triton, and even the griffon that we had before, we always find this kind of way toward this facing of death during this period of his production. Then, let's see, the works that follows will exploit always the same type of theme, but with different title. Now, for instance, here you will call them gris-gris. Gris-gris is an amulet. So then it's interesting because it's a way also to protect yourself from evil, from bad things. And you will have a gris-gris carbon, or carbon because, of course, it's a way to duplicate an image. And here you have the same system that we have before. It is with its two canvases with hinges in between that you could fold over. And this is because now it's a bigger painting. These paintings are almost 2 meter by 2 meter, so you cannot have the same type of freedom that you have in a small page like before, like we see. Sometimes the superposition of the faces that appear will suggest you will see also a totem in a way. You will have some of them who will be called totem like this because one is above the other. Gris-gris dos. Gris-gris mass, I think that would be difficult to translate also. Gris-gris and mass, gris-mass, as if you have always a kind of a face with it. Some of them are quite efficient in terms of the mask that appears. See, noir de gris-gris, you see very clearly 2 eyes and the nose and the mouth. I hope I'm not the only one to see that here. Okay. Cœur de totem. Alors, then, like I suggested, see, if you begin to superpose a few faces, like you have one here, maybe another one, then teeth here. So you could have this idea of many, like in a totem pole, a kind of superposition of many images, one above the other. Flamme de totem, this is interesting also. Sometimes it will make completely black and white picture. Black and white is interesting because it's a way to work on the structure of the picture. And not to be distracted by color. When the structure is well established, then you could add the color and you could build it up differently. A flamme de totem it's a good example of that. And finally, the end of the period, you see 1989, was the occasion of a huge project that unfortunately didn't finish completely. He was contacted by Lavalin at the time, you know, on the Peel Street, near the Dorchester, no, pardon, René Lévesque. And you have, an old Montrealer still call it Dorchester, what can I do? And you have there a kind of a huge building, and Hurtubise was commissioned by the Lavalin company before they had their trouble. As you know, they had some financial difficulty, to put it mildly. And they wanted to make a vitrage, a kind of window glass with themes that he will choose. And what he did, of course, what you see, it's not really in glass, it's just kind of project for it. It's like, in fact, he used a sheet of coal tar, like he said. So, you know, this kind of black sheet of paper that we use for isolation, for instance, or insulation of the house or on the roof. It's a very dark color, if you want, but also it's matte. Doesn't have any reflection. So this is what you have in the bottom. And there is many elements also have been like collage on this. It's hard to see on a reproduction, but you could imagine that there are some collage element also. And he obtained, again, these kind of faces. They go 2 by 2, And they are quite big. It would have been very impressive. I guess La Vallée was circled by these faces all around. And unfortunately, it stayed in that stage. You know, it was never executed in glass, but that was the idea. Coltard aux larmes, larmes are tears, of course, and you see the two eyes are sad also. It's a little bit like the transposition of this idea that the ancient used to call tête d'expression. You know what it is? It's for instance, Lebrun did that. It's head in which you try to express, by changing a little bit the features, different feelings. Alors, une tête d'expression, basically, is that. It could be sad, it could be joyous, it could be angry, and you just transform a little bit the head to get a different feeling. So now, Coltard aux larmes, let's say, will be a kind of sad face, if you want, but also quite fearful. It's not. And the second one, mort aux lèvres, this I was looking for, how do you call this? This is when you have a horse and he have, the mort is this, what you put in his mouth to be able to direct it. Bit? Yeah, the bit, okay. Not bite. No, okay. And mort aux lèvres, so again, the first one was alluding to the larm, down to the eyes, and now you have a concentration rather on the mouth. So the eyes are not very clear here, but you have this big mouth, and you will see, we will find very often this type of position. Like say, Coltard aux dents, so les dents, it's of course the tooth here, the teeth, let's say, that you see with two eyes, and it's again. So they are habitually done with 3 panels. You see, the 2 panels on the side are really symmetrical. You see, you can fold them. And the one in the middle could have been done differently, maybe even in freehand. And it's difficult to know exactly how it's done. But they are always organized like this in 3 sections. Again, you see it here, Coltard à l'œil. Alors, you have also the eyes and the mouth. And they look always like big mask, big presence, let's say, not friendly, like distanced from you, looking from above, and a little bit like I described before with the picture of Michaud. Dents à l'œil de verre, and now the whole surface is almost colored, is almost covered completely. You don't see anymore the Coltard, the sheet of paper. And dents de verre, you will have bad dreams tonight, if you remember all this. And then mort aux dents, this is really like going wild, if you want. And finally, hors aux dents, a kind of play of words, mort and hors aux dents. And it's unfortunate that this project was never executed, but because of financial problems, like I told you, it stayed just in a series like that. They were shown at the Galerie Tétreault at the time, like in the stage where they are, and they were interesting as such. So it's, I think when you summarize a little bit this kind of, this process of Hurtubise, I thought, my first idea, I said, I must find a more modern painter in which the type of question that I was asking with the other lecture will fit. And of course, the answer here, you could say, well, when you have an experience of the limitation of human nature, like death, for instance, where it's really an experience of our fragility, of our limits, then always religion have an explanation. Yeah? And it's this great psychoanalyst, Jacques Lacan, French psychoanalyst, who used to say, and it's very astonishing in his mouth, because he was not a believer, he was an atheist. He says, don't worry, he says, the more science is messing the world, the more religion will become important. As if the fact that technology is making our world more and more absurd and difficult to deal with, the religion have the answer. They will give meaning to what's happening. I think he suggests that ironically, or maybe even sardonically, but because he was not a believer himself. But there is something there. I think one of the functions of religion was certainly that, to try to give meaning. And give meaning to death, I think what you see here, it's not, Hurtubise is not also a pratiquant, or maybe he was Catholic when he was young, like all of us French-Canadian, but he, I'm sure he's not interested in religion anymore. But you see the struggle of an artist, in fact, with this absurd death, and the absurdity of death and the limit of human nature. And he does it, in a way, I think, quite convincingly by his own work, by his own picture, one after the other. And okay, you could say, well, this is a little bit repetitive, and that's why you have to go fast with the picture. When you have repetition, habitually, you have a problem, because you are stuck on something, so you go back and back and back, and you try to make sense of it. And I'm not astonishing by this kind of repetition, even the very fact also that each image is a symmetrical image, in which you repeat the left, repeat the right. So as if he was stuck with that for 10 years, and it ends up in this beautiful series that I show you at the end, as not as an answer, but as finally the end of the struggle, if you want. What follows after is still a little bit the same thing, but much more complex, and without any allusion now to death or things like that. Like this one is almost also a pop image. I think you have, he used this pattern of leopard skin, and he cut it and he glue it like this. But here you have many panels, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, one beside the others to create this. And he called it Bocéphale. Bocéphale is not the real word that you have in French. It's bucéphale, normally. Bucéphale, bucephalos in Greek, is the famous horse of Alexander. This is the name of the horse of Alexander. And indeed, you do find some of the last image of Hurtubise with the system of the horse, like this, with the, like Pur Sang Rouge, of course, this is a kind of more recent work that he did. Okay, so we finish with that. It's my 12th lecture. I think I have enough myself. I don't know. You were a wonderful audience. I thank you very much. I'm also very touched by the faithfulness of many of you that I recognize from year to year. And even with the weather like we have, really thank you.